We often look at our bad habits as enemies we must fight, but rarely do we stop to ask why they exist in the first place. Every habit, whether it's scrolling endlessly on your phone, procrastinating on important work, or overeating, is serving a need. It's not random, it's not meaningless. There's always a reason underneath the surface. That reason might be comfort, it might be stress relief. It might even be a way of distracting ourselves from something we don't want to face. When you light that cigarette, binge, watch another episode, or skip the gym, the behavior is not the real problem. It's the solution you've unconsciously chosen for a deeper problem. This is why willpower alone rarely works. You can force yourself to stop for a day or two, maybe even a week. But if you haven't addressed the underlying reason, the habit will return the moment your energy dips. Because you weren't battling the habit, you were battling the need that created it. To truly change, you need to look beneath the surface and ask the harder question: why am I doing this? Not in a judgmental way, but in a curious way. Curiosity gives you power. It takes the shame out of the habit and replaces it with understanding. And when you understand why, you gain the ability to choose differently. Imagine someone who procrastinates on starting projects. On the outside, it looks like laziness. But if you dig deeper, the why might be fear of failure or even fear of success. Unless that person acknowledges the fear, no amount of productivity hacks will work. The bad habit is not the real problem. The fear is. Or take someone who eats junk food late at night. On the surface, it's about cravings. But if the deeper why is loneliness or stress, then diets won't solve it. What they truly need is connection, comfort, or healthier ways to process stress. Once you see the deeper purpose, the path forward changes completely. When you start with why, you're no longer trying to rip a habit out of your life by force. You're trying to replace the need it serves with something better. The energy shifts from punishment to purpose, from guilt to growth. That shift is what makes transformation possible. And it all begins with asking yourself the simplest, yet most important question: why do I do what I do? The truth is, most of our bad habits happen on autopilot. We reach for our phones the moment we wake up. We snack when we're not hungry. We interrupt people without realizing it. These actions are so ingrained that we don't even notice them happening. And if we don't notice, we can't change. Awareness is the first crack in the wall. The moment you catch yourself in the act, something shifts. You're no longer just the actor in the habit. You become the observer. That separation is powerful, because once you see a pattern, you have the option to choose differently. Think about it. If you want to stop overspending, you can't begin by cutting expenses blindly. You first need to know where your money goes. The same is true with habits. Before you can redesign your behavior, you have to track it. Awareness is like holding up a mirror. It reflects the truth back to you, even if it's uncomfortable. One of the most effective ways to build this awareness is by simply writing things down. Journaling your habits, noting what triggers them, and how you feel before and after each one gives you clarity. What once felt like a fog of automatic behavior suddenly becomes a map you can navigate. Sometimes awareness comes through the people around us. A friend might point out how often we complain, or a partner might mention that we always retreat into our phones during conversations. These observations can sting, but they are gifts. They show us blind spots we can't see on our own. The key is not to judge what you notice. Awareness without compassion leads to shame, and shame keeps us stuck. Instead, awareness should feel like turning on a light in a dark room. Nothing changed in the room itself. The furniture was always there, but now you can see it clearly, and that clarity gives you choices. Once you see your habits clearly, they begin to lose some of their grip. It's like watching a magician's trick after you've learned the secret. You can never be fooled in quite the same way again. The illusion of control that the habit once held over you weakens with every moment of awareness. And in that space between noticing the habit and acting on it, transformation begins. We often believe that change must be dramatic to be meaningful. We imagine quitting a bad habit in one bold stroke or transforming our lives with one massive decision. But the truth is, transformation doesn't usually happen in explosions. It happens in tiny, almost invisible steps repeated over time. Think of a plane leaving Los Angeles headed for New York. If the pilot shifts the nose of the plane by just a few degrees south, the plane won't land in New York. It might end up in Washington, D.C., or even further away. The change in direction is small, but given enough time and distance, it changes the entire destination. Our habits work the same way. A small shift could be as simple as drinking water instead of soda, taking the stairs instead of the elevator, or pausing for 30 seconds before reacting in anger. None of these choices look life-changing in the moment, but stacked over months and years, they redefine your health, your relationships, and even your identity. The challenge is that small improvements rarely give immediate rewards. That's why so many people quit. Going to the gym once doesn't transform your body. Saying no to one cigarette doesn't make you healthy. Reading one page doesn't make you wise. But compound those actions day after day, and the results are undeniable. We underestimate the power of these small choices because they seem too ordinary. But that's exactly why they're powerful. They fit into daily life. They're sustainable. They don't require you to summon superhuman willpower, they only ask for consistency, and consistency is the multiplier of change. One workout may not matter, but 50 workouts shift your energy. One day of meditation may not bring peace, but 100 days rewires your brain. One conversation may not heal a relationship, but showing up day after day builds trust. What looks small today becomes enormous tomorrow. The person who chooses progress over perfection ends up far ahead of the person waiting for the perfect moment to change. Momentum is built not in giant leaps, but in small, steady steps forward. Every small shift is like planting a seed. You may not see the tree today, but in time, the roots deepen, the branches grow, and the landscape of your life begins to transform. Most people try to break bad habits by relying on willpower. They grit their teeth, make promises, and force themselves to behave differently. But willpower is like a muscle, it gets tired. When stress builds or energy runs low, the old habit sneaks back in. That's why so many attempts at change collapse after a few days or weeks. The real key is not to focus only on what you do, but on who you believe you are. Your identity shapes your actions more powerfully than willpower ever could. If you believe you're just not a disciplined person, every effort to change will feel like swimming upstream. But if you begin to see yourself as someone who values discipline, the current changes direction. Think about someone who is trying to quit smoking. If they constantly say, "I'm trying to quit," their identity is still tied to being a smoker. The habit remains part of who they are. But if they say, "I don't smoke," the shift is immediate. The identity changes first and the behavior follows. Identity-based change is powerful because it aligns your actions with your sense of self. A person who identifies as a runner doesn't ask, "Should I run today?" They run because that's who they are. A person who sees themselves as a healthy eater doesn't agonize over every meal. They naturally make choices that align with their identity. The same principle applies to bad habits. If you define yourself as procrastinator, you will always find ways to delay. If you see yourself as a person who finishes what they start, you'll push through even when motivation fades. Identity sets the standard for what feels natural or unnatural. This doesn't mean you need to reinvent yourself overnight. Identity shifts happen in small steps, reinforced by repeated action. Each time you act in alignment with the new identity, you cast a vote for it. Every workout is a vote for being an athlete. Every page you read is a vote for being a learner. Every moment of honesty is a vote for being a person of integrity. The more votes you cast, the stronger the identity becomes. And once the identity is strong enough, the habit is no longer something you force yourself to do. It becomes something you simply live out. You don't wake up asking whether or not you'll do it. You just do it because that's who you are. Lasting change happens not when we change our behavior temporarily, but when we change the story we tell ourselves about who we are. When most people try to break a bad habit, their first instinct is to cut it out completely. They focus on stopping, quitting, or eliminating. But simply removing a habit often leaves behind an empty space, and the human mind doesn't like emptiness. That void demands to be filled, and if we don't choose what fills it, the old habit usually returns. Habits exist for a reason. They serve a purpose, whether it's reducing stress, avoiding discomfort, or seeking pleasure. If you remove the habit without addressing the purpose it serves, you're fighting against human nature. You may succeed for a short time, but eventually the need resurfaces, and without an alternative, the cycle repeats. Imagine someone who spends hours scrolling on social media. If they delete the apps, they might succeed in staying offline for a few days. But if the habit was meeting their need for connection or relaxation, the craving for that need doesn't disappear. Unless they replace scrolling with a healthier form of connection, like calling a friend or taking a walk, the void will pull them back online. The same is true with smoking, drinking, or overeating. If cigarettes provided a moment of calm, or food offered comfort, simply cutting them out leaves a person restless. The body and mind will search for relief. But if they replace smoking with deep breathing, or food with journaling, the need is still met, just in a healthier way. This principle explains why so many people relapse after short bursts of self-control. They focused on what to remove, not on what to add. Transformation doesn't come from subtraction alone, it comes from substitution. By designing a new habit that serves the same need in a better way, the old one loses its power. Replacement also makes the process feel less like punishment. If you only focus on what you're losing, change feels heavy and restrictive. But if you focus on what you're gaining, a better option, a healthier outlet, a more rewarding habit, change feels like an upgrade. The energy shifts from deprivation to growth. Over time, the replacement habit begins to rewire the brain. The triggers that once led to the bad habit now lead to the new one. Instead of lighting a cigarette when stressed, you breathe. Instead of scrolling when bored, you read. Instead of eating when lonely, you connect. The need remains, but the response evolves. Breaking bad habits isn't just about what you stop doing. It's about what you start doing instead. We like to think that our habits are purely a matter of discipline, but much of our behavior is shaped by the environment we live in. The spaces we spend time in, the routines we build, and the people around us act like invisible hands guiding our choices. Change the environment, and the behavior often changes automatically. Consider how easy it is to eat junk food if your kitchen is filled with chips, cookies, and soda. You don't need to consciously decide to snack. The decision has already been made by what's available. On the other hand, if your kitchen is stocked with fruits, vegetables, and water, your options naturally push you toward healthier choices. The environment nudges you silently. The same is true with routines. If your phone is the first thing you see when you wake up, chances are your day starts with scrolling. But if you place a journal or a book next to your bed instead, you create a different trigger. You don't need to battle your willpower in the morning. You simply designed your routine to lead you somewhere else. People are part of your environment too. Surround yourself with friends who constantly complain, and you'll likely complain more. Spend time with people who value growth, health, and positivity, and you'll naturally start adopting their patterns. Behavior is contagious, and we often mirror the habits of the groups we belong to. This is why certain places make certain habits easier. A library makes you want to study. A gym makes you want to exercise. A quiet cafe may inspire you to write. The same person in a different environment behaves differently, not because they suddenly found more willpower, but because the environment invited a new behavior. Small environmental shifts can have massive impact. Moving your phone across the room can reduce late-night scrolling. Preparing your workout clothes the night before can make exercising automatic. Even the arrangement of your desk can determine whether you focus or procrastinate. Each adjustment reduces the friction for the behavior you want and increases the friction for the one you don't. The beauty of shaping your environment is that it works in the background. Once it's designed, it doesn't require constant effort. The space, the cues, and the people around you keep reinforcing the new habit. It's like placing a stream in a new channel. Once the path is carved, the water flows naturally. When you take control of your surroundings, you take control of the unseen forces that influence your daily choices. One of the biggest reasons people give up on breaking bad habits is because they slip back into old patterns and see it as proof they can't change. They mistake a single failure for final failure. But failure is not the end of the process. It's part of the process. It's not a verdict, it's information. When you fall back into an old habit, it's a signal. It shows you something about your triggers, your stress, or your environment. Instead of asking, why did I fail? Ask, what can I learn from this? That shift in perspective turns every setback into a lesson. Every stumble into data that can guide you forward. Imagine a scientist running an experiment. When an experiment doesn't work, they don't throw everything away. They study the results, adjust their method, and try again. That's how progress is made, through iteration. Your habits are no different. Each relapse is not a collapse, but a chance to refine your strategy. For example, if you're trying to cut down on sugar and find yourself reaching for dessert late at night, that slip is valuable feedback. It may reveal that your willpower is weaker in the evening, or that you didn't eat enough during the day. With that insight, you can adjust, maybe by planning a healthier snack or setting boundaries earlier in the day. Failure also reminds us of our humanity. Nobody transforms without friction. Expecting perfection only sets you up for disappointment. By accepting that setbacks are part of the journey, you release the shame that keeps so many people stuck. Shame says you failed, so you are a failure. Feedback says you slipped, now adjust. Some of the most successful people in the world built their lives on failure turned into feedback. Athletes watch game footage to improve. Entrepreneurs study mistakes to innovate. Musicians rehearse the same passage over and over until it's mastered. They don't run from failure, they use it. The danger is not in slipping back, the danger is in giving the slip more meaning than it deserves. One missed workout doesn't erase weeks of effort. One cigarette doesn't erase months of progress. What matters is how quickly you respond, how fast you return to the path, and what you learn in the process. Failure is not the opposite of growth, it's the raw material for it. Every time you fall, you have the chance to rise with new insight, new strength, and a deeper understanding of yourself. We often treat change as a finish line. We think, once I break this habit, I'll finally be fixed. Or once I reach this goal, I'll be complete. But transformation doesn't work that way. It's not a destination you arrive at one day. It's an ongoing journey that keeps unfolding as long as you're alive. Perfection is the trap that keeps people from moving forward. The moment you slip, the moment you don't measure up, you feel like you failed the whole mission. But transformation was never about being flawless. It was about building a pattern of progress, step by step, moment by moment. Every small improvement is part of the journey. Reading one page makes you a little wiser. Choosing to walk instead of sit makes you a little healthier. Choosing kindness over anger makes you a little stronger. Each of these moments may feel small, but they stack up into a direction that shapes the story of your life. When you see transformation as a journey, patience becomes easier. You stop demanding instant results and start valuing the process. You learn to appreciate the small victories and trust that they are carrying you somewhere meaningful. Growth becomes less about rushing and more about staying consistent. Purpose is the compass that keeps you on course. Without it, the journey feels endless and exhausting. With it, every step, no matter how small, feels connected to something greater. You're not just breaking a bad habit, you're becoming the kind of person who lives in alignment with what matters most to you. Journeys also allow for detours. There will be days when you drift off track, when old habits return, or when progress feels invisible. But a detour doesn't erase the road. You're still moving forward as long as you choose to return to the path. Every stumble is just part of the terrain. This perspective frees you from comparison. You stop measuring your progress against someone else's timeline, because every journey is unique. What matters is not how fast you go, but whether you're heading in the right direction. Transformation is not about arriving at perfection. It's about walking each day with intention, knowing that the life you're creating is slowly taking shape, one step, one choice, one habit at a time.